Good afternoon. Welcome to TNC Radio.live. This is the Truckers Network Radio Show. And now here's your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNC Radio.live, where we offer the entertainment, sports, weather, traffic, news, and information that our commercial drivers want to hear. Stress is a daily factor in the lives of our drivers. Some days it's more profound than others. Too much cumulative stress is bad, as we all have heard. But did you know it can also cause amnesia? With us today is a registered nurse and author, Shannon Carroll, who co-wrote a book called One Thing Remains. It's about her husband's sudden amnesia in 2019. She's got a very compelling story to tell and can inform listeners about how stress really can impact our lives in the wrong way. Welcome, Shannon. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It is truly an honor to get to speak with your listeners and share some of our story.
We're very interested in your story. I'm really intrigued with the whole concept of stress-induced amnesia. I've never heard of it. Could you tell us how all this began?
Yes, and we had never heard of this. It had never even crossed our mind that this could be a possibility either. It started in the spring of 2019. My husband was 48 years old, fairly healthy, but busy. And as we look back, he was overly busy, full-time job as a pastor, and that comes with its own stressors, as each occupation does. We had a homestead. We had 3 boys, and I was running a home-based business. We were homeschooling, just the life stuff, right? We're all dealing with just life, and it piles on and becomes more overwhelming than we even realize in the moment. And we had some warning signs that the stress was starting to get to him. He was having some chest pain, felt the need to sleep a lot, didn't have a lot of energy for life in general, was irritable, and that had a cascading effect in our marriage and with our family. But we didn't ever do anything to change our lifestyle. We just kept going on. And it was the Sunday after Easter in 2019, he woke up, and I thought he was having a heart attack. He insisted on going to work that day, which he should not have, hindsight. But he went to work. We went through the church service, and afterwards he said, "I've got to get to a hospital." So he let me drive. That was another sign that he wasn't doing very well. He always wanted the reins of the car, but he let me drive. We were about 35 minutes from the hospital where I wanted to go because, again, I thought he was having a heart attack, and I wanted the best care for him. I thought we could make it quicker than the ambulance. So I'm talking to him on the way there on the highway, going as fast as I could to get there, and he started saying things like, my vision's getting kind of blurry, and I'm having trouble breathing. And I'm talking to him, trying to keep him with me. And one of the times when I asked him a question, he didn't answer. And I looked over, and he was completely unresponsive. And I screamed, I shook him, screamed his name, no response. So I pulled over to the side of the road on this busy interstate, called 911, and ran over to his side of the car and started CPR. However, I realized he did have a little pulse, and it was irregular. He was breathing, but it was also irregular, but completely unresponsive. It took 10 minutes for the ambulance to get there, the longest, scariest 10 minutes of my life. I thought I was going to lose him on the side of the road, and at one point I thought, is this how it all ends? Like, just like this? This is awful. He started to come to right before the ambulance got there. They took him to the hospital. I followed closely behind, and I wasn't even sure he'd be alive when we got there. And we arrived at the emergency room, and I expected them to start doing the tests and tell me, yes, he's got a massive heart attack happening. We need to go to the cath lab. But as they hooked him up to the monitors and did all the initial tests, they said his heart actually looks fine. And I was so confused. And then he started being confused. He started being paranoid, thought everyone was out to get him. This was very unusual for him. He's very level-headed and logical, but he was talking like everyone there was crazy. He needed to get out of there. So then they started running tests on his brain, thinking maybe he just had a stroke. Well, all of those tests came back normal. And by late that evening, when he finally settled down, we realized that he had zero memories of the last 8 to 13 years of our life. It was as if he had gone to sleep in 2009-ish and awakened in 2019. He didn't know his job. He didn't know where we lived. He didn't know my occupation. He thought our younger boys, who were 9 and 10 at the time, were actually still in car seats. I remember I said to him, "Do you remember the businessman Donald Trump?" Like trying to orient him to life. And he said, "Yes, I remember him." I said, "Well, he's now the president of the United States." He went, "Get out of town." It was just all so new. I was texting friends on my iPhone, and he said, "What is that?" And I said, "It's my iPhone." And he goes, "Wow, that looks a lot different than a BlackBerry." It was so bizarre. And the practitioner spent 3 days with us in the hospital running every test imaginable. And they said, "We have read about things like this. We've never actually seen it, but he is a completely healthy man." So most likely this severe amnesia was caused by years of cumulative stress.
Wow.
They said, "Go home, live your life. Your memories may or may not come back." And with that, they discharged us home to figure out life with someone who didn't remember any of our life.
Were you able to find any kind of help? I mean, was there any kind of therapy, or were you kind of left to your own devices?
They didn't give us a whole lot of insight at the hospital. And so, yes, I spent a lot of time researching. David read a book by Dr. Caroline Leaf called Switch Your Brain On that was really helpful for us. We were actually getting ready to contact the Mayo or the Cleveland Clinic to find help through all of this, but there was not much out there about stress-induced amnesia. But we realized that stress is a risk factor, not only for heart disease and stroke, but for losing your mind. We joke about it, but it happened to us.
Wow. So how long did he have this amnesia?
The amnesia lasted for 26 days.
Okay.
During that time, we just tried to orient him back to life and try to live, not knowing if his memories would ever come back. We took him to the church where he pastored, and he didn't recognize any of it. We walked into our home, and we had lived there for maybe 5 years at that time, and it was as if it was a brand new house. He had no memory of ever being in that home, and he was emotionally detached from the things that he couldn't remember. So he kept referring to it as my house. We joke about it now, but he said at one point, he said, "Hey, I noticed that your water heater is leaking, and you need to call your plumber." I said, "Well, that's our water heater, and our plumber's number is in your phone." But he was just detached from everything that he couldn't remember, detached from our homestead, from church, from all of life. This very emotionally distant. However, it gave him this new perspective on our life, and he was able to help us make some decisions about changing our life and our lifestyle that we had never been able to make before because we were too emotionally invested in what we were constructing as our life.
Oh, sure. Wow. That had to have been so scary for him as well as the entire family.
It really, really was. And honestly, until we wrote the book, he and I weren't aware really of what the other one was going through. We were just trying to survive. I was his Google 24/7. I couldn't let him out of my sight because he might run into somebody that knew him, quote unquote, but he didn't know them. Sure. And so I would have to be his buffer. And it was very scary. But, you know, when you go through something that scary and a trial that bizarre, when you're suffering, what is on the inside comes out. And I saw a man who had a deep faith, but also had a lot of peace. And I believe that was people praying for us, but he was at peace through it all. And I'm really grateful for that. He did have some moments where he lost it. One of those was some people brought food over. Our church really cared for us well during that time. And someone brought a dish that was made out of quinoa. And I was excited about the dish, but he lost it at that moment. And he said, I don't like quinoa. I've never liked quinoa. And I don't care what you tell me about what I used to like. I promise you, I never liked this stuff. He goes, I'm going out and getting a burger. So he had had it with all the changes and what he had been told he was like or life was like beforehand.
Sure. Lots of frustration I'm sure he was having. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
I imagine he had all kinds of emotions. We definitely want to unpack more of this and what you've learned about stress-induced amnesia. It's a mystery. I have never heard about it. And it's amazing, too, how the doctors, when it comes to the brain, they still don't know. And that makes it so much more frustrating for the patients and the families and everything. We're talking to Shannon Carroll. She's the author of One Thing Remains. She's talking about stress-induced amnesia that her husband had. This is the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up. 6 safety tips for truck driving in hot weather. Driving in the heat can create dangerous situations for truck drivers. Drivers need to take specific precautions before hitting the road in extreme heat. When there's an incoming heat wave, drivers need to be aware of how to safely drive in these weather conditions. Follow the Truckers Network's 6 safety tips for truck driving in hot weather. Every truck driver needs to complete a pre-trip inspection before driving, especially in hot weather. Check your tires. Heat can have a huge effect on your tires. As the temperature increases, so does the air pressure in your tires. During the hottest months of the year, it's important to frequently check your tire pressure. Frequently checking your tires can save you from a blowout. To get an accurate measurement, wait for your tires to cool down before checking the pressure. The heat and friction from the road causes your tires to warm up, which will cause a rise in tire pressure. Also, don't be afraid to take a break every couple of hours to let your tires cool down. Protect your engine. Not only should you protect yourself from the heat, but you should also protect your engine. One way to keep your engine from overheating is to frequently check the engine oil. The oil keeps the engine cool and keeps the parts running smoothly. Engine coolant is just as important as engine oil. Coolant helps prevent the engine from overheating in extremely hot temperatures. Keep an eye on the coolant temperature gauge while driving. If the gauge goes above the safe temperature, pull over and see what's going on. Failing to look at the situation could lead to engine failure. Also, make sure to check for leaks in the hoses. A cracked hose can lead to engine failure. Check your brakes. Cold and hot weather affect your semi-truck's brakes. When you brake, you create a significant amount of friction, and your brakes become extremely hot. When you add in hot weather, your brakes have an even higher chance of failing. To avoid your brakes from failing, brake gradually to decrease the amount of heat. Also, regularly check your brake pads to ensure they're working properly. Tips to protect yourself from the hot weather. It's just as important to protect yourself during extremely hot weather. Follow these tips to keep yourself cool and safe. Stock up on water. As the temperature increases, you need to increase your water intake. Make sure to always have water in your truck. You never know when you might get stuck in traffic or break down on the side of the road. Wear sunscreen. Many truck drivers forget this step. Even when you're in your truck, you're still exposed to the harmful UVA rays. Make sure to put sunscreen on before hitting the road. Wear light-colored clothes. Light-colored clothing reflects light, and dark-colored clothing absorbs it. Wearing light-colored, loose-fitting clothes helps you stay cooler and more comfortable.
Hot Shots Secret presents Steve Summers' Overnight Drive nightly at midnight Eastern, 11 Central on tncradio.live or download the app .tncradio.live.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and we're talking with Shannon Carroll, who's the co-author of One Thing Remains. It's about stress-induced amnesia that her husband suffered from for nearly a month. Oh my goodness. What a compelling story about what your entire family went through in 2019. How did his memory come back, Shannon?
Well, it was fairly miraculous. So all along during that time, we tried to trigger his memories. We thought if we put him in this setting or we relive this memory, they'll just come back. And it didn't. He said it was like someone had taken an ice cream scoop and scooped them out. He couldn't access the memories. However, during the 26 days, a random memory would sometimes pop out. There were about 5 times when he remembered something during that blacked out time. And so we knew the memories were there, but they were just under lock and key. So on the first day when we were in the emergency room and he's asking questions about our life and our lifestyle, he said, "Do we ever get away and go on vacation?" That was one of his first questions. And I said, "Well, you got 4 weeks of vacation last year from the church, and we only took 2 of those. And those 2 were business trips for me. So no, we don't get away very often." And every day he said, "We need to get away. We've just got to get away. We need to go on vacation. I need to get away." And looking back, I see that it's because he was so overwhelmed with being the odd man out in our family. Everything was new. He was taking in continual new information and it was exhausting. And he wanted to step outside of that to get some perspective, to relax. But he was insistent that we get away. Well, some very generous friends in our church heard about his need and desire to get away, and they provided us a week in Florida. So I knew that this trip to Florida was going to be healing in some way. I hoped that his memories would come back. We were praying for that and hoping, but I knew that just getting away by itself was going to be healing. And we actually had a really rough week. It was a big tug of war talking about our life going back. And he said, "I can't go back to the church." I said, "You've got to go back to the church." And then we had a fight in the grocery store about sunscreen because he wanted to buy regular sunscreen. And I said, "Well, we use natural sunscreen now, so it doesn't cause cancer." And just all of this tug of war between his reality and my reality. But his reality wasn't real. It was based on the lack of memories. And at one point, I thought this trip has just been an absolute disaster. And then the very last day before we were to come home, he got up like he always had done that week to watch the sunrise on the balcony, from the balcony. And he was reading his Bible, having some quiet time by himself. And he said he finished reading. And so he closed his Bible and he stood up. And when he stood up, he blacked out. He describes it as when you stand up too fast and your vision gets a little blurry, except he had no vision. It was completely black. And he thought, "Oh, great. Am I going blind now too?" So he grabbed a hold of the rail and he said, again, I told you he's a level-headed guy. This is totally out of character for him. But he said this intense tingling started at the top of his head. It's like when you hit your funny bone, but more intense. Started at the top of his head, went all the way through his body, out his toes. And when it went out of his body, he opened his eyes and he had complete vision and he realized he was thinking about the church. He realized all of his memories were back.
Wow.
So he ran into the room where I was, I think, scrolling on Facebook, sitting in bed. And he said, "Shannon, I think my memories are back." And I said, "Are you kidding me?" And he said, "Why would I kid about something like that?" He said, "Ask me a question. Ask me, test me." And I said, "I can't think of anything to ask." He said, "You're not helping me." So finally, I thought of a question to ask him that he had not yet been taught during his time with amnesia. And he answered it correctly. I asked him who a certain person was. He gave me the answer. And we both just stood there and bawled like babies.
Oh, I bet.
And considered that our celebration day.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing.
Did you talk to any specialists? Did they have any explanation? How does this sort of thing occur? I mean, that's absolutely scary.
It is when you realize how fragile our brain is. I'm a registered nurse and I'm now in the health and wellness industry. And I think about our heart and our gut health and our skin. But to be honest with you, I had never thought about our brain. It's just out of sight, out of mind. Yet it is a very fragile and necessary component to our existence, and it's very much affected by our lifestyle and how we live. So we did not specifically talk with an expert. My plan was, after we got back from Florida, to take him to one of those specialist clinics if his memories had not come back. But they did come back, and so we never went and saw anyone else again. We just have lived our life, changing things, obviously, to elevate brain health and taking care of our brain. So many people I talk with, and I teach brain health classes now, and they're struggling with memory loss or lack of concentration or brain fog or chronic headaches and tiredness. And those are all warning signs that the brain has taken on too much. The brain is saying, slow down. Stop all of this. I wasn't designed to handle this much stress, but we overlook it. In fact, we wear it as a badge of honor a lot of times.
Oh, sure we do. Yes. I can do this no matter what. Oh, absolutely. People are their own worst enemy when you think about it. We don't listen to our bodies. Did they run MRIs on him? Were they able to see any kind of anything with the tests?
Yes, they did run MRIs and seizure tests and heart caths and echoes and every test imaginable for the heart and the brain while we were in the hospital. And it was all 100% normal.
Wow.
So there's this aspect of memory that doesn't show up on an MRI, but is obviously very much affected by our life. And then what we saw of our memories being attached to our emotions, because when he didn't remember things, he didn't have the emotions for them. It's a fascinating and really complex system.
It really would have been. Now, the fact that you are an RN, that had to have helped because you knew what to look for in terms of physiological things. But it was still a mystery because you weren't getting any answers. And you don't know how to deal with that. It's like, how do I trigger this person's memory? Will this be forever? How do we work through this?
It really was a mystery, and I felt very helpless. Yet I had to be on for him at all times. So after his memories came back, we actually had about 2 months of recovery, both of us. We were exhausted. It was like we had been in a little bit of an adrenaline rush for that month. Sure. And then we both needed to rest. One of the things we realized is how much the brain needs sleep. And I had in the past gotten mad at him for wanting to take frequent naps. But afterwards, I don't get on his case anymore if he needs a nap. In fact, I turn my to-do list over and take naps or sleep more, because our brain, that's when the brain resets. Yeah. So after his memories came back, he remembering before amnesia. He remembered everything during amnesia. And then afterwards, it was like his brain needed to take all the puzzle pieces and fit them back together. And it was exhausting and took about 2 months of recovery. The church gave him another 2 months off before coming back to really heal and process what we had just been through.
It's interesting how the human brain works. My mother had encephalitis caused by a cold sore, and she recovered, which was amazing. She did have disabilities afterwards, but when she was trying to piece things together, she was asking questions. Is this person alive? No. Okay, that's what I thought. Trying to identify, put things back in place. That's what she was doing. And of course, we got zero answers from the doctors. It's like, well, most people don't live through that. Okay, well, that's really not the answer we want here. So what do we do? It's so frustrating, so stressful. And what you and your husband went through and your family, oh my goodness. Most people can't imagine. Every day you were on. He was leaning on you, and he was stressed because he was having to learn things all over again and frustrated,
Very much so. We went to a grocery store one time, and he said, what if I meet someone there that thinks they know me and I don't know them? And I said, well, just shake their hand and introduce yourself as if it's the first time. And he said later, I realized, hey, what does it matter? I don't actually know them, so it's okay. I mean, it was such a strange way to process. And at some point, I'd love to tell your listeners about how he handled positive versus negative conversations when he didn't have his memories.
Well, maybe we could talk a little bit about that in the next segment. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show. We're talking with Shannon Carroll. She's the co-author of One Thing Remains, about the stress-induced amnesia her husband had. Very compelling story. Stay tuned for more right here on tncradio.live.
This blog is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 4 simple ways to improve your physical health as a truck driver. Being a truck driver is a rewarding career. However, it's not very rewarding for your physical health. A truck driver's lifestyle makes it difficult for them to be healthy. Because of their lifestyle, truckers are more likely to develop serious health issues like obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes, and more. Although a truck driver's lifestyle doesn't promote healthy living, it doesn't mean that a truck driver cannot be healthy while on the road. There's several ways you can improve your health on the road. Here are 4 things you can start doing today to improve your physical health on the road as a truck driver. Avoid harmful foods. Avoiding unhealthy foods is way harder than it sounds. As a truck driver, your healthy food choices are extremely limited. While it may seem impossible to completely cut out unhealthy foods from your diet, it might be a good idea to cut back. You can start cutting back on unhealthy foods by packing meals in your truck. That way, the next time you get hungry on the road, you can eat a much healthier meal instead of eating greasy, high-calorie fast food. Another way you can start cutting back on unhealthy foods is to make a list of unhealthy items you eat every day and start slowly replacing them with a healthier option. For example, if you drink soda 3 times a day, cut back to 2, then to 1, and then none. Stock up on healthy foods. To live a healthier lifestyle, you have to cut back on heavily processed foods. Unfortunately, a truck driver's diet heavily consists of processed foods. Stocking up on healthy groceries is one of the best ways you can improve your physical health. When grocery shopping before your trip, avoid frozen pre-made meals, sodas, fried foods, chips. Instead, look for whole grain, fruits, veggies, and healthy fats. Start exercising. Exercise is essential to a driver's overall physical and mental health. Truck drivers have to get creative to stay fit while on the road. Finding the time to exercise can be a challenge for truck drivers. Drivers spend up to 11 hours a day on the road. After working all day, exercising may seem like the last thing you want to do, but you'll thank yourself later. Exercising a few times a week will not only improve your physical health, but also mental health. Get a good night's rest. The right amount of sleep is crucial for a truck driver. Lack of sleep can make driving dangerous. A study shows that long-haul truck drivers obtain less sleep than the required amount of alertness on the job. Truckers need a good night's sleep to be fully alert and ready to take on the road the next morning. Truck drivers travel several hundred miles each day. To reach their destination on time, they'll have to prioritize sleep so they can be alert and ready to take on the day. Not only is sleep an important factor for job performance, but it's also important for lowering stress levels and improving your immune system. Now, here are some ways to promote better sleep. Turn off electronics an hour before bed. Invest in a good mattress and pillow. Put up curtains in your truck cab. Avoid caffeine before bed. And exercise. This blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
Hey, y'all, this is Curtis Grimes, and I want to give a shout out and a special thank you to everyone associated with tncradio.live.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly, and we're talking with Shannon Carroll, who's the co-author of One Thing Remains. It's about the stress-induced amnesia her husband went through. Tom, you said you had some questions for Shannon.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Shannon, thank you so much for being with us. What an amazing story, and a wonderful story of not just the way the brain works, but I think it's also an interesting story of the way God works. And so I find it all really amazing. Now, my questions may not be unique. They're probably not, but two questions for you. Number one, people can be weird, even pastors. And I say this coming from a family with pastors. So hopefully my brother's listening and rolling his eyes. But did you consider or think to yourself at some point, he's just faking this? This isn't.
Yes, I did actually. In fact, it was kind of like the Truman Show movie or something that was just so bizarre. And David is a teaser and loves to have fun and tell stories. And so I remember looking at him in the kitchen one day and saying, "Is this all a game?"
Mm-hmm.
He said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Are you just faking this whole thing?" And he said, "No, I'm not faking it. Why would you think that?" And I said, "Well, I just had to ask because this is all so weird."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And some part of you that's even going, look, just let me in on the joke. We won't tell anybody,
Yes.
But this has to end because I don't want to play anymore.
Yes, I was ready. Take me out.
Wow.
This isn't fun anymore. Let's quit.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
I can imagine that. I mean, because people can be weird sometimes, and So that was one of the questions. The other one, and I knew I should have written these down because, see, I must be having too much stress too. In the process of his, you're talking to him about different things. People grieve through life. I think about my last 8 or 9 years, and there are some things I don't dwell on, but I don't want to remember them again for the first time because it would be very sad. People who have left my life, or sad things that have happened to me over the last 8 or 9 years, that I would be very distressed to find out that those are things. Did he have to re-grieve? And that's probably not the right word, but you get what I'm saying. You'd say, "Oh yes, so-and-so passed away 6 years ago," and that's the first he's heard about it, and now it's a loss.
Yes, that's in fact a very insightful question that no one has ever thought to ask me before. So thank you for bringing that up, because that was a very tender thing that I didn't expect. I'm his historian. So during this time, I'm filling him in about things that have happened at church, things that have happened in our family. We had gone through a stillbirth and then another second trimester miscarriage in that time that was blacked out, if you will, in his memory. And so I'm just rattling off these things that have happened, trying to get him up to speed, not even registering with me that it's hitting him as if it's the first time. And in fact, we were cleaning out the closet. He jokes that I got rid of all of his things. We cleaned out the garage. We cleaned out his closet during this time. He didn't remember any of it, so he let me get rid of a bunch of stuff. It was wonderful. But we were cleaning out the closet, and I'm rattling off all these things that have happened. And I told him about a really traumatic thing that had happened with our kiddos, and he stopped, and he was visibly shaken. And he said, "Shannon, I'm going to have to ask you to not tell me another negative thing about anyone or anything." He said, "When you tell me something negative, it goes in my brain and it just swirls around. I have no context for it. I have no box for it to land in. And it's overwhelming and painful. And I don't know how to process anything negative." And I said, "Well, I feel like there are some things you probably need to know that happened during this time." And he said, "If it's important, I'll figure it out, or it'll come out in just regular life. But if it's not important, it can just go by the wayside." And he made me stick to that during the entire time. I would get ready to fill him in on something or someone that was a little bit of a negative thing. He'd say, "Stop. I don't want to hear it. I only want to hear things that are positive." And that blew me away and was one of the things that it taught me. We have our memories, right? You and I do. And so we rattle off negative things to each other all the time, and we don't recognize a negative effect on our body from that. But when you give him a clean slate, he didn't remember our arguments. He didn't remember our disagreements. He didn't remember any of that. You introduced something negative into it, and there was a visible reaction. And we get too used to the negative reports.
Sure.
How did he do at recalling what? So you're his historian. You're telling him all this stuff, and this happened 4 years ago, and it was quite an excitement at the church because she had triplets or whatever. And then the next day, does he remember that you said that yesterday, or do you have to retell it again? I'm talking during the time, of course, that 26 days. Was it he's solid once you've told him? Or, I mean, he may not have the memory, but he remembers that you said it. Does that make sense?
Yes, and he had so much clarity, and he remembered everything I told him during that time. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One is all of the stressful memories of the past 10, 12 years were gone. So his brain was like operating at this high capacity. In fact, I was blown away with the amount of clarity and the intelligence and expertise he had during this time, because he didn't have stressful memories bogging him down. Yeah. And also, I think it's because I did research and I developed a brain breakthrough protocol. It's actually on our website that you can go look at. But I was pumping him full of supplements and foods and things that feed the brain during this time. And he had a lot of clarity. But it's also one of the reasons he would get exhausted, because literally 95 to 98% of the information, the senses that are coming into his brain during this time was new information. You know, I said, can you help me put the dishes away? Well, sure, if you tell me where they go. He didn't know what side of the bed he slept on, which toothbrush was his, what our financial passwords or status was. So we're telling him all these things, and he would often say, my brain is full. I can't take any more new information. It was exhausting.
Oh, it would be. It's like learning your life all over again in less than a month.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Was his personality different? You think
he was still the same David. Okay. And that gave our boys a lot of comfort. A lot of people ask how our boys handled it. They were 9, 10, and 16 at the time. It was a very traumatic experience for them to see him in the hospital, but it was also traumatic for him to see them. You know, he pictured the younger two as still in car seats, and they walk in as 9 and 10-year-olds.
Oh, yeah.
He pictured the 16-year-old as in, early elementary, and he walks in with a full beard. And after the boys left, David broke down in tears, realizing how much he had missed of their life. But once we got home, he still had a lot of the same personality. And that gave the boys a lot of comfort. In fact, they enjoyed watching with him as if it was the first time all the Star Wars and Avengers, and getting to tell him the fun parts that were coming up. His personality was the same, but his understanding of life was regressed. He preferred music that he had preferred 10 years ago. He had several cultural context comments that were things he would have made in the past and not in the present.
Right. So it's almost like his brain took a break.
Yes.
In a way, so that it could regroup, you think?
And heal. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it was a nightmare, yet it was a gift, and allowed us, people say, I need a sign from God in order to have direction. Well, we got our sign, and he hit us over the head with amnesia and woke us up, and it would be irresponsible of us to go back to life the way it was before. And we took the opportunity to really take stock of our life and change almost every aspect of it.
Well, you find out what's really important, and you're able to focus and pivot and sit down and say, no, this is what we're going to do now. It was a wake-up call for sure. Oh, my goodness.
It was. And we walk through in the book how to do that without having to have amnesia. right? Because most people aren't going to have the Amnesia platform to make those changes. So we have some step-by-step outlines in the book about how to do that without losing your mind in the process.
Well, maybe we could touch on some of those points, because I think that people would be very interested in this, and certainly not coming to the point of having amnesia, but how they can maintain brain health and lower their stress and maybe regroup ahead of time. That's always a good thing. This is the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. We're talking with Shannon Carroll, the co-author of One Thing Remains. Stay tuned for more right here on tncradio.live.
This blog on tncradio.live is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 5 easy steps to help truckers stay awake while driving. Driving 11 hours a day, 7 days a week can be emotionally and physically exhausting. Sleep's a very important part of a long-haul truck driver's life. Being well-rested and alert makes driving a lot more safe for both the trucker and other drivers on the road. Getting enough sleep may sound easier than it seems. Living on the road makes it difficult to get the recommended 8 hours of sleep. In fact, it's common for truckers to not get 8 hours of sleep due to the 11-hour work shift. To help, we've put together 5 tips to help truckers stay awake while driving. Take vitamins. One way truckers can stay awake while driving is by taking vitamins. Not only are vitamins good energy boosters, they have tons of other health benefits too. Vitamin B helps with fatigue, depression, mood boosting, and muscle weakness. Consider adding vitamins to your morning routine. Eat healthy. An unhealthy diet has a huge impact on one's overall health. Jennifer Sachek, PhD now, says our bodies rely on the energy and nutrients we get from food. So what you eat, and how and when you eat it, can either drain you or sustain you. It might be more convenient to stop at a fast food restaurant or truck stop, but constantly eating junk food drains your energy. Check out our blog on quick and healthy meals for truckers for healthy food ideas. Take a nap. Before you hit the road, consider taking a short 20-minute nap. Several studies have shown that a quick nap immediately increases alertness and gives a boost in cognitive performance. Stay hydrated. Water has many health benefits. One benefit is reducing the chance of being fatigued. Drinking a pint of cold water is a great way to refresh yourself and stay more alert. Listen to upbeat music. Listening to upbeat music will have you tapping your foot, singing along, and staying alert in no time. Avoid listening to relaxing music or audiobooks. These tend to make drivers more relaxed and sleepy. Truckers have a very demanding job. In order to deal with the stress and demand, it's very important to get the right amount of sleep. Hopefully, these 5 tips will help truckers stay awake while driving. This blog has been brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
This is Alec Debogorski. Catch our new show, Taillights, Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Central on tncradio.live.
Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kelly. We're talking to Shannon Carroll, who's the co-author of One Thing Remains. It's about the stress-induced amnesia that her husband went through. Oh, my goodness, a very compelling story. Shannon, you said really doctors didn't give you a whole lot of answers as to how amnesia happens. I know it's such a curiosity, isn't it? How the brain is still a mystery.
It really is. There's a ton of information out there about when someone has had a car accident or some type of head trauma.
Yeah.
They have fallen and hit their head, and so then they have a concussion or temporary memory loss. That is most of what we hear. And that makes sense. We can wrap our brains around it, pardon the pun on that. But the doctors just kept saying, was there any injury? Was there any precipitating factor or moment? And there wasn't. It was almost, maybe the best way to describe it is a very complex nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
Or he had never had panic attacks before or since, but it was almost like that, where his body physically and emotionally said, if you don't do something to change all of the inputs of stress, then I'm going to do something for you.
Yeah.
And the brain, as a protective mechanism, just shut down and removed. When someone goes through a traumatic experience, like in childhood, oftentimes they will not remember that experience for a while. The brain has a way to protect itself as another warning sign. It's a pretty severe warning sign. We should have listened to the flares that happened before. Right. That's the best way I know to describe it. And I have heard of some people going through immense amounts of grief who have temporarily lost their memories, short term usually, for a couple of days. I've never met anyone that went through something that we did. But I think of it makes the most sense when you think about a complete nervous breakdown in the brain trying to protect itself.
It's like the brain was saying, you know what, I'm just going to clean out this closet.
Yes.
These are things you don't need to be dealing with right now. I'm going to shove them off to the side, deal with life. This is going to cause a reset. You're not going to have the stress. You're going to have a different kind of stress, but you're going to re-examine and make a change. And when I think it's ready, then I'll give you your memories back.
Yes. And I wonder, without being stereotypical, are there a lot of us in middle age where we know life is too stressful? We know we're exhausted and there's not as much joy, and we've got the brain fog and maybe even occasional anxiety or chest pain. Yet we feel trapped and like, well, I've got to keep doing it. There's nothing I can take off my plate. There's nothing I can change. So I just have to press on. And we've been there. We understand that. That was David. And God humbled him in a big way and said, you will take stock. You will stop and evaluate. And you know what? We found out there was a lot that we could take off our plate and a lot that we could do to find true peace and a season of rest. The stress you feel tied to it, but it's actually keeping us in bondage.
And you restructured your life after that. And in your book also talks about steps to evaluate your life without having amnesia and why it's so important. Did you want to share some of those points on what people could look at so they don't have these issues, so they can deal with stress better and maybe reevaluate their situations?
Absolutely. That is really one of the passions that David and I have now. We're acutely aware of stress. We're hypersensitive to each other's stress, because we know what it can do. In fact, on my website, there is a free gift, 5 steps to stress less. And so that's available for anyone. But in our book, we do talk about some things to evaluate. We talked about putting it all on the table. And we had put everything on the table before to evaluate, but we had picked it all right back up. And after this experience, we changed things. We sold our house and our homestead. We downsized all of life and restructured our entire lifestyle. So my recommendation for others is pretend as best you can to be an outsider looking at your life. One of the gifts David had was he was truly an outsider looking at our current life, and it gave him a different perspective than being involved in the day-to-day. Or ask an actual outsider, hey, what do you think about my life? And that's hard to do because we have to listen to what they say. Ask where do you see me too stressed or burning the candle at both ends, or what am I doing that maybe isn't important? And then we made a list of everything big and small that currently demanded our time and attention. And we put everything on a sticky note and spread it out over the table. We prayed over each one. I mean, we had our jobs and our homestead. The kids are lucky they didn't get put on the sticky notes and evaluated. I mean, we listed everything that we could, and we rearranged it. We considered each one, and we took several off the table. And then we asked some really hard questions and made ourselves answer honestly, not what we wanted to hear, but honest answers to questions like, what is the greatest source of stress in my life right now? Will this activity that I'm so attached to actually matter in 1 year or 5 years or when I die? We encourage our readers to picture getting rid of or imagine getting rid of this one stressor. Do you feel sadness or do you feel relief? What is our gut saying to us? That's another question we can ask. What do I want most to be known for? Do I know my purpose in my life? I can tell you this is a really hard process. It's painful to let some things go. Good things. Most of our lives are filled with good things, but they're not the best things. We had a value of homesteading and being self-sufficient, and that's a good thing, but it wasn't the best thing, and it was driving us into the ground. We were doing too much at church. We had to let some of that go. And now we're in a season where there is more peace and more rest, and our priorities are different.
These are real thought-provoking things that people can do. And it's wonderful you're sharing this, because I don't think people often do that. I do think that maybe the pandemic has made people do some re-examination.
Yes.
Well, especially with a lot of people working at home, they're rethinking, what do I really want to do? There have been career changes since the pandemic. People have said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to do this. So I guess the pandemic has brought out some good things in that regard. But I think people have done a lot of self-analysis, like what you're talking about. But these are really helpful suggestions.
Good. And a reminder that this is not a one and done activity. This is something that David and I revisit often. If we're starting to notice we're getting too stressed, we will sit down and reevaluate. We realized, we put this back on our plate and we shouldn't have. This should have been a no, not a yes. Right. Or we need more exercise, or we need more sleep, or we need to change our diet again. There's a constant reevaluation that I want to give people permission to do, because living the stress out, burned out rat race it's not God's best life for us.
No.
It's not what we were intended, how we were intended to live.
Absolutely. Very true. And you also, do you have on your website information on brain food and that sort of thing? Because I know that people who have gotten COVID have had some brain fog, and maybe some of this could be helpful to them as well, and brain health.
Yes, absolutely. Such a good point with the brain fog from COVID. Also, yes, our website, shannonlcarroll.com, there is a brain breakthrough PDF on our wellness page. Honestly, the best thing to do for your brain is sleep. And getting 8 hours of really good sleep at night is one of the best things. I know that's not always possible, probably for a lot in your audience, but making sleep a priority when you can, it allows the brain to reset and process what happened through the day, stop taking in new information, and to really heal. So we prioritize, like I said, sleep. B vitamins, B as in boy, they're like brain food. And we probably aren't getting enough from our diet, so we do need to supplement with B vitamins. The Cleveland Clinic has even said that B vitamins can help delay memory loss associated diseases. Omega fatty acids and fish oils, berries, nuts are so good for us, raw fruits and vegetables, and avoiding sugar. Sugar is like a drug that greatly impairs and impedes our brain health.
It really does. It tastes so good, but it's so bad for us. So thank you so much, Shannon. What is your website again?
It is my name, Shannon L. Carroll, and that's 2 R's and 2 L's on our last name. And I would love to connect with anyone who is curious about the things we've talked about today.
This has been fascinating. So it's shannoncarroll.com, correct?
Shannon L. My middle initial is L for Lee. ShannonLCarroll.com.
Thank you. I forgot the L there. I need to work on my memory. So
I can help you.
I appreciate that. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Shannon. She's the author of One Thing Remains, about stress-induced amnesia, brain health. Very, very, very important topics here. You've been listening to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up. Thank you for listening to another great interview on tncradio.live and the Truckers Network radio show. All of the material you hear on tncradio.live, on our website, our broadcasts, or our podcasts are copyrighted. There can be no distribution without the express consent of tncradio.live and its partners. For inquiries, write us at info@tncradio.live. Live. live, live, live.